Well, we just heard from Robert Jenrick there. What was your reaction to what he was saying? I heard you listening.
Well, he said the British public expect a proper system that is safe and fair. That is not what we have. And today is Groundhog Day because 18 months ago, Priti Patel stood up and said, the asylum system's broken. I've got a plan, I'm going to fix it. It's got worse since then. And we now have a situation, as we talked about in Prime Minister's Question Time today, where only 4% of the people who came across on small boats last year have been processed. This is a problem of the government's making because the delays are now so long, the decision-making is so collapsed and the number of returns is so low, we're returning a tenth of what we used to do, that the whole system is an opportunity for those criminal gangs to really exploit people and to get them to this country, because what's going to happen? They're not going to have their asylum claim looked at for at least a year and possibly not returned even if they're turned down. The whole system is chaotic, and that's where criminal gangs are making the most of it and exploiting people, and people are making those difficult, dangerous journeys.
I take your point, of course, about how long the Conservatives have been in power, but this is a new administration under Rishi Sunak. He's got a new immigration minister as well, who acknowledged that the processing times are not good enough, but they are putting more resources into trying to correct that. Robert Jenrick also saying that things are improving at Manston and they're on a path to a well-functioning and legally compliant site within days. I mean, I guess you can judge them in a few days, but if things do improve, should you give them any credit?
Well, no, the system has been broken for a long time. We've known this. The Home Affairs Select Committee had a really damning report back in July saying, look, this is a huge problem. The number of people coming in is only going to increase. This is not some surprise shift in what's happening. We've seen it coming. And of course, in Manston, it's been absolutely devastating. And the local MP has said, it was working fine in Manston until 5 or 6 weeks ago when the Home Secretary, he says, took a policy decision not to increase the number of hotels and therefore we've seen the big increase of people and children sleeping on cardboard, which is awful, and reports today that people have been taken to Victoria Station and left there, not even given accommodation. I mean, the whole thing is chaotic. And it all comes down to how the government seems incapable of running anything, including the asylum system.
Do you know anything more about this judicial review? Or are you learning as we are?
I'm learning as you are, but I'm not surprised. And we've said this is going to cost the taxpayer money because you can't break the law and put people in those conditions and just ignore that and allow that to happen. Of course, there are going to be implications of judicial reviews that are going to cost money. The government should have got a grip of this months ago, actually years ago, and they are failing to tackle the criminal gangs who are driving this process. They are failing to do the administration.
Yeah. Because you know, I've heard you talk about criminal gangs. I asked you about Cooper about Labour's plan to stop the small boats. She said it was all about criminal gangs. Keir Starmer again mentioning it at PMQs. It's very easy to say, let's stop criminal gangs. Everyone would agree with that statement. But it's very hard to do it, isn't it? That's just classic opposition politics, some would say.
Not at all. Let's look at where you put your priorities. So the government want to, well, they have already spent £140 million on a Rwanda scheme that they announced that hasn't happened and we think will probably never happen and doesn't work anyway. Instead of spending the money on the Rwanda scheme, we would spend the money on the National Crime Agency, having a new workforce there of people who can crack down on those gangs. Now, it's not easy. I'm not promising that it is, but if you put the resources there, you make choices in government about where you put your money and where you put your priorities. We have to work with other countries because we know that the criminal networks are not just in the UK, they're across multiple countries, so we have to work with our allies on tackling it, but that's where we need the expertise. The National Crime Agency is really good, and we know it's also at risk of being cut under the new regime from Rishi Sunak. So we need to know that the government is going to keep the resource there, but we would put more.
Resourcing is important, but it is still very, very difficult. You know, I was reading into what Interpol says about these people smuggling gangs. low risk of detection and prosecution and arrest compared to other activities of transnational organised crime. They go on to say the relationship between criminals and migrants is very much a temporary one, making the criminals difficult to trace. They are generally unknown to the people who are smuggling. They hide behind pseudonyms in encrypted chats, use rental vehicles, different mobile phone numbers. You can put more money in, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy suddenly to do something
No,
about
but
it.
you can disrupt their model. And disrupting their model means getting rid of a system that means that if you get to the UK, you'll be a year before your case is processed and you might not be returned even if you're turned down as an asylum seeker. The criminal gangs can say, there's no other legal route, this is your only option, you'll be in the UK for at least a year, it's worth spending your money. We need to disrupt that as well as going after the criminal gangs.